everyone, it's me, Krista. Welcome back to my channel if you've been here before. If not, welcome for the very first time to my little art corner here on YouTube. Today I'm going to be testing out all the markers that came in December 2019's Premium Sketchbox. But I am more interested to try out the paper that I have not used yet, and that is some Copic Paper Selections Premium Bond Paper. It's acid-free. This also came in the Sketchbox. I've never used any kind of Copic paper whatsoever. I have a basic idea of how the markers are going to work. So this will be new and interesting. Because the paper feels a little bit thinner than I am personally used to, I did put another sheet of scrap paper underneath it. This is just some leftover photo paper that I have. I did this in case it bled through any, because I wasn't sure how I was going to handle everything. At this point, I am sketching out the cat. I'm using a reference photo of our black cat named Ace. I did realize at this point that I should have probably done a sketch on a different piece of paper and transferred it over. The eraser that I used, it did not erase very well combined with this paper. I have a feeling using a kneaded eraser would work a little bit better. And I just kind of start going in with the marker pretty quick after getting a very basic sketch down. I started with the eyes, just using the yellow marker and using a little bit of the Copic olive green color on top of it. For this cat, even though it is a black cat, I am going to use a bunch of different colors to make it. I start with the olive green and then I go over it with the lighter purple of the two Sketchbox markers. Since it is a very red-based purple, going over this olive green does create more of a brown tone. And I also decided to go with the purple first, and then put the olive green over it, and the effect is very similar. I wanted to try it out because I know sometimes, depending on the order that you put the marker down in, it can vastly change how the color looks. It didn't really do that here. This drawing was a little challenging for me because I did have to mix the markers together a lot and mute them, basically. I am muting a lot of these colors instead of just being like, bam, look at all the saturation. Look how pretty and bright it is. Here it's going to be much more muted. And part of that is I wanted to see, since these colors are kind of an interesting combination, it's definitely not a color combination I would pick. I wanted to see how well they could play together and what kind of tricks I could use in order to make it work for drawing a cat. The way I'm layering them too does show how the different brands all will play together and work together. Since they all seem to be alcohol-based markers, I will say that they all blended out fairly well, and I didn't have any issues of any of the markers pulling up or anything like that when I was layering, which I know sometimes when you jump brands and you mix them all together, that can happen. Either they look really gross together or they start lifting each other up. I like how the purples both layered on top of that olive green and vice versa. I really enjoyed the shades that it created. And doing that took me from having a olive green cat into having some base layers for a black cat. This cat's actually really interesting in person. He looks super black in photos, but in person he has little lighter patches, and it's not white patches. It's as though his underneath fur is light in kind of a tan color, whereas the outside of his fur is black. He also has some stripes that you can see really well in sunlight. So the roots of his fur are kind of a light tan or a beige color, and the tips of his fur are straight black. It's very fascinating. And if you ruffle up his fur, underneath is all tan. And it's not his skin, it's his fur. Yes, I'm a crazy cat lady, in case you were actually questioning that. At this point in the drawing, for some of the lighter areas, I went in with that pumpkin color, and I am just jumping back and forth between the different markers we have. The neutral gray did not muddy up the colors as much as I thought it was going to. It actually worked really well for what I'm doing to marry the different colors together, and especially to blend out the black later when I bring that in. For the background, I start with a layer of just the olive green and moving the nib in all sorts of different wild directions. Then I jump back to the cat. I start pulling in some of that black liner, specifically starting with the eyes and then adding black to some other areas to help further define the shapes that I already have going on. So far, my favorite item that came in this box is actually this black liner. I love how you can use it as a liner, but you can also cover some pretty large areas with that black. Also, once it's dried, it doesn't seem to move, but if you move very, very quickly, you can smudge it out and blend it out with the other markers. I did that with some of the purples and grays as I started using the black more for shading. It's just a very versatile liner. I love the different line thicknesses you can get with it, and it just felt good to use. I liked it a lot. And I use that liner quite a bit. I rely on it pretty heavily for this black cat drawing. I use the other colors as a kind of a base for highlights and some shading, and then went over with this black. I also did use it as an actual liner for outlining our kitty cat. I just realized as I am looking at this drawing at this point in the process that before pulling in as much of this black as I have, it looks almost like it's supposed to be a tortoiseshell cat, which was not intentional, but this color scheme can work for that kind of kitty as well, apparently. I was trying to think of something that wasn't flowers because as they kept repeating in the documentation that came in here that it is a very floral palette. It would be very easy to draw some irises or some lavender or something like that with this, which I will probably do later, but I wanted to challenge myself a little bit, and I also wanted to challenge the markers layering and this paper as well. At this point, I decided the background was a little bit too green, so I did pull that pumpkin color over it, and I also pulled it in for more highlights. And here I'm pulling in some of the other green in with some of the shadows and for the eyes. I pull in some of the lighter purple onto that background again, and then I decide that I want it to be slightly greener, so I go over with the olive green again. So I technically have 4 layers of color going on in that background, and I think with doing that, it pulled in a lot of the colors I have in the cat already, and it muted the background enough so Kitty still stands out. And doing projects like this does remind me how versatile alcohol-based markers can be. It's so tempting with markers, especially with lines like Copic's that have every single color that you could wildly dream of. So it's so easy just to grab whatever color you need at that moment and not really think about how they interact and blend. When you have less markers like this, you realize how many colors you can blend together to create those colors you want anyway. You don't need a whole 500 set of Copics. That might be exaggerating slightly. Back to this point in the drawing, I did cheat slightly. I brought in a white gel pen to help pull out some of the highlights since I covered all the paper at this point. I do go over all of the highlights with the pumpkin color again, with the exception of in the eyes because I wanted those really wet highlights to pop out there, whereas on the fur I wanted it to be a little more subtle. At this point I realized that my Pentel Signo white gel pen, the broad one, is officially dead, so I had to switch over to a Sakura one. And here I am putting in some whiskers, and I do the same thing I did with the highlights on the fur. I go over again in that pumpkin color just to make it much more subtle. And at this point, we are just doing some of the finishing touches. We're going to be blending some stuff out, adding a quite bit more black. So for this paper, I don't really care about the square formatting. I know it's really trendy, and a lot of people really love it for use on Instagram. It doesn't really do much for me. I usually only use square canvases when I have a very specific idea that will work for. I don't think about doing stuff in a square format a lot. The paper itself is really smooth. I think the marker applied fairly well to it. It does seem to catch every individual stroke that I did with the marker. The paper is thinner than I personally like it to be, and it didn't bleed through. But you will see here in a couple of seconds how the back side of the paper looks. A lot of papers I use for marker you don't see as much as this going on in the back. But I do layer markers quite a bit. I don't think as many people do quite as much layering as I do. That's the whole reason I like thicker paper to begin with, is because of it's more of a personal preference, because I know how I work and I know how many layers I use, and I need something that can stand up to that. I will say it did not bleed through though, so I am still fairly impressed. Next, we will be doing a project using the bristle board that came in this month's Sketchbox. Here's a finished shot of the cat alongside the markers, and as you can see, this project is finished. If you liked this video, please hit that like button. If you have any comments, questions, feelings, or concerns, please let me know in that comment section down below. I look forward to hearing from you. If you want to see more videos like this, please feel free to subscribe. I want to take this moment to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day or night to watch this video and listen to me ramble about art stuff. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. I look forward to hearing from you guys soon, and you will definitely be hearing from me soon. Bye, everybody!